in this adaptation pilot discussions, it's my pleasure to introduce Ida and Nöne. It's my master students that will send in their hopefully very nice master project in late June. So they're very busy. They will maybe show up once in a while during these 3 days, but they will also have a lot of work to do in the office, so they will not be here all the time. But Ida and Nöne will present our adaptation pilot. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for letting us have this whole presentation about the master thesis about the conservation agriculture in practice in the region of Zealand in Denmark. And we will first we will tell just very shortly a little bit about Danish agriculture in general, and then we will tell about the project design. And afterwards go into more details with the different methods that we use in the project, and finally we will tell a bit about how it is connected to Climate Cafe project.
Yes, and very shortly about Danish agriculture. 62% of the area of Denmark is used for agriculture, and 82% is used for fodder production, and only 6.6 of the area is organic farming. And there's around 40,000 farms, and 2/3 of these are located at Jutland, and 1/2 of those are arable farms, and 1/4 is specialized in animal production, and it's mainly pig production. Yes, and 90%. The sector accounts for 90% of the greenhouse gas emission in Denmark.
And now about the master thesis. The period is from we started in November last year, and we're handing in, as Henrik said, in the end of June. So right now we are in the analysis phase of the project. And the research question that we work with is how can conservation agriculture, as it is practiced in Denmark, be considered sustainable, and how can the sustainability of this agricultural practice be improved? And the definition of conservation agriculture that we work with is based on 3 principles. The first principle is a continuous minimal mechanical soil disturbance, and the central for this is that the farmers they are not plowing. Then the second principle is to make great use of a permanent soil cover of organic matter, and that can be, of course, the crops, but also cover crops, and especially also plant residues. And then there's also a principle of using a diverse crop rotation in order to keep the system healthy, and also to try to reduce external input, for instance manure and other nutrients, and pesticides.
Yes, and we work with one case, a group of farmers who know each other through some years from a knowledge sharing group. There are 11 farmers, and they all practice this conservation agriculture, but in different degrees. Some are doing direct sowing, and some are still doing more or less disturbance of the soil. And they are 29 to 77 years old, but most are in their 50s, and they're all located at Zealand. Yeah, there. Yeah, the farms are range from 83 to 800 hectares, but most of them are 200 to 300. And the main crops are wheat, barley, rapeseeds, and some started having beans, and there are grass seeds, turnips and clover, and some spinach. There are also 3 of the farmers who have pigs, but we are not looking into the animal production in this thesis. And yeah, the soil type is mainly clay, which is common for Zealand. And they mention the main reasons for having a conservation agriculture system for them is to save work hours and save fuel, and then they consider it more easier to cultivate this soil. They improve the carrying capacity of the soil, and then they consider themselves more curious and the type of farmers who are interested in new ways of doing things. They consider themselves less conservative than other farmers.
Yes, and then we will tell something about the methodological considerations of the thesis. The overall approach in the thesis is a holistic system approach, in the way that we look at mainly at farm level, at the farm as a system of different flow and also different interactions with other systems, for instance the environment and the society around. But we are focusing on the farm level system. We will also discuss, for instance, some possible improvements in conservation agriculture at a societal level. So we will change to the surrounding system of the Danish agricultural system. Our analytical framework is mainly made up of some sustainability parameters that we chose in order to also have a holistic approach to both looking at a farm system, but also at farm level, but also looking at the agricultural level, the agricultural system as in general. And we are inspired by different reports and different models, all concerned with sustainability assessments of farming systems in particular. And then we have adapted it for our case. So we've chosen the soil quality, nutrients, pesticides, biodiversity, climate and energy, economic factors, and social factors. So we are also in this thesis we are looking more broadly into not only climate and climate adaptation, but having a more holistic approach. And then we are the way that we collect the data and our empirical findings is mainly based on a participatory approach, in the way that we've made this future workshop with 8 farmers. Then we've made qualitative interviews with 11 farmers, and then we are doing an analysis with the farm design model, and we use data from one of the farms. We will go into more details with the different methods.
Yes. And here you see our project design and the different elements in our work. These participatory methods and the holistic approach kind of make the frame. And we started out with all the yellow squares, boxes are our methods and the empirical material. And we started out with the workshop with 8 farmers, and it gave us a lot of empirical material for analysis, but also it was our starting point and we formed our problem formulation or research question based on the findings from this workshop. And then, of course, during the process with the rest of the data collection, we revised this research question. But then we had a lot of literature studies, and we made qualitative interviews with 11 farmers, and we also used the narrative templates in our interview guide. Yeah, and then right now we're in the first. We are writing on the first analysis part, where we describe mainly how is this conservation agriculture actually practiced in Denmark, and how the farmers define conservation agriculture here. Yeah, and then we use the farm design model to, well, there's more components in this tool. We use it to explain what is going on in one exact farm system, and to have a more in-depth analysis on one farm, and then to explore how can we optimize the system and make it more sustainable. Yeah, and we are in the explain phase of that on using the farm model right now. And for the model we use some of our knowledge from our qualitative interviews, but mainly a lot of data from the farm, and some standard data, and we use some experts. Yeah, and we hope to come up with some recommendations how to make conservation agriculture more sustainable in Denmark, and how it can solve some problems for the farming system in Denmark.
Yeah, so now we'll tell a bit about this method of doing future workshops, as we know some of you also have done. The reason to choose a future workshop was mainly, or our motivation in consultants with Henrik, was to try to bridge the gap between farmers and researchers, and to investigate what are the practitioners actually doing, and what do they find relevant to do research about. The future workshop gives different options. It is a way to create awareness in a group of common problems and challenges, and also common visions for the future, which also was a way to find a possible scope for the master thesis. And also for the group, the future workshop made clear different options for future actions, to a way to for the farmers to work with what can we do ourselves. And the structure of the workshop was a whole day from morning to afternoon, and we chose to work with the overall theme, our daily conservation agriculture practice. And the workshop was parted in 3 phases. First, what are our main challenges? And second, what are our visions for the future? And third, how do we get from ideas to action?
Yes, and yeah, you can see how the workshop looked like. We and yeah, the farmers are sitting here, and we had a wall to make a big.
Sorry, can you speak up?
Yes. Yeah, the workshop had two. There were 2 parts of this 2 components in this first part of the workshop. there was a brainstorm and then a voting. And we had a brainstorm on a wall with the posters, and and afterwards the first goal was to find out what is critical in their farming system. So you had to be negative and make it short and no discussions. And then we have all these posters with the constraints, and then they had 2 votes each, and they voted and came up with these results. So the most annoying constraints was the inconsistent politicians, and then they said having to reinvent the wheel, and narrow-minded consultancy, and then there was some more technical stuff like inefficient cutters and the combine harvester, and there are very different answers to this.
Yes, and then second we looked into future visions, and then we turned the whole thing around and said now you're only allowed to be positive and just wish whatever you would want for the future. So we did also, as in the first round, a brainstorm and a voting, but now with these new rules. And afterwards we parted into groups to try to unfold these future visions and get more into depth with what would this vision contain. And we parted into 3 groups and worked with 3 future visions. The first one was increased research, education and technological development in relation to conservation agriculture, acknowledgement from the surrounding society of the beneficial effects of conservation agriculture, and the last one, more positive laws and politicians also in favor of conservation agriculture.
And the third part of the workshop focused on how do you get from ideas to action. So they had more group work where we had these posters. We made them beforehand, and they had to make an action plan. They had to define an overall goal and sub-goals, action and stakeholders. And it was a really hard task for them, but they also really managed to come up with some good plans and find out what stakeholders could use them in the process of realizing some of these ideas.
Yeah, and maybe we should just they ended up with presenting the things that they've been done in the group work for the whole group, and it also went very well, and they gave feedback to each other, which was really interesting.
Yes, in general it was very important to always have the very open process where they all the time shared what did we find out now in the groups. So it was a collective process.
Yeah. So some reflections on the future workshop. We did an evaluation as to sum up the day with the farmers on as a part of the future workshop, and our own evaluation of the process was that mainly it went very well. The farmers were very engaged, much more than we actually expected. We had some startup problems due to miscommunication, and that's a good note to really stress this communication part, and also think or to not take for granted that researchers and farmers might actually be talking very different languages. and then we would also like to have had some more time for the action phase, both because it was a bit difficult and also because it was actually where it got really interesting, especially for the farmers. The outcome of the future workshop, well, in general, we could say that all the actors or the stakeholders got to know each other more and got a clear understanding of individual expectations. And then also for the Climate Cafe project, it also contributed to bridging this gap between farmers and researchers. In particular for the master thesis project, we used some of the material to form a relevant research question, and we've done that in response to what the farmers said, that they had a wish for more research about conservation agriculture in Denmark, and a wish for acknowledgement in society of conservation agriculture as a sustainable agricultural method. And of course, so it's also, as Ida mentioned, empirical findings for the project. For the farmers, they mentioned that this was a new and interesting experience for them, and that they have got some more awareness of common challenges and common future visions. And some of the farmers in this network group, they are also doing a lot of organizational and political work as well. So they would like to use the results for some of their work. Yeah.
Yes, and then we use this farm design model. This is which is developed in by Wageningen University, and we had a really good cooperation with them, and they were very helpful in the process. Yeah, and the tool is it has different components, but it's an iterative process where you make some co-design with the farmers. So it's very much in line with our participatory framework. We use it to make an analysis of the resource flow at one farm, and then there's a described phase where you add all the data from one farm, and then afterwards you evaluate this, or you get explanations from the model on nutrient flows and different inputs and outputs, balances, and then you evaluate together with the farmer and put some goals for how do we want to optimize the system, and of course you adjust this together with the farmer, and you get some outcomes. How could this farming system look in the future? And then it's a process where you adjust it. And then you can do it, of course, over and over again. So that's the overall concept of the model.
Yeah, this we will not go very much into details with that, but that's a figure showing most of the elements that the farm design model does calculations on. So and this is mainly nutrient flows, and there's also some other elements, but these are the main elements that the model does calculations of.
Yes. Yeah. And we use the model to get in-depth knowledge on one specific farm, on the resource balance. Yeah, and then of course, we test this model as an option for the farmers to use to optimize the system.
Yeah,
and then we, of course, we test it in a Danish context. It's developed in the Netherlands, and we also have some constraints in that. But yeah, see how it can be used other places.
Yeah, and for more details about the farm design model, we have Walter and Rose as specialists. So
Experts.
Yeah, experts in that. They know much more details. And just finally, about the Climate Cafe project, we've tried to scope our thesis to generate as much material for the Climate Cafe project as possible. Of course, the thesis gains knowledge about this adaptation pilot, and what we've found out is that some of the possible climate adaptation strategies is with conservation agriculture. We can mention some effects on, for instance, increased water infiltration capacity, reduced evaporation, reduced erosion, less fluctuations in soil temperature, and then there's also some interesting climate mitigation strategies in conservation agriculture. For instance, that the farmers use less fuel because they are not plowing the fields, and especially on in clay soil, it's a really heavy machinery work to plow the fields. So they are also mitigating less greenhouse gases, and then there's also potential for carbon storage in the soil. That's something Henrik knows a lot more about. And then, of course, we've used the Climate Cafe narrative template in our as the body of our interview guides. Yes, and then hopefully we will come up with some interesting recommendations and maybe some new interesting research questions. Maybe also for the further work in the Climate Cafe.
Yes. Do you have any?
Questions?
Just one question. How is conservation agriculture considered in the, say, agricultural society? Like just compared to Germany, it's still very small there, and as soon as people explain more about it, then there's always this, oh, you spray more, so that's why it has really hard standing. The ones who do it are convinced, they think it's a great practice, but the other ones always have these concerns.
Yes.
Did you hear that from your farmers?
Definitely, it's the same. They consider themselves very much as a minority, and they experience a lot of critique, both from conventional or traditional farmers, if you might say that, but also from organic farmers. So they feel a bit squeezed, and they are in between, and meet a lot of critique.
But how is the discussion about herbicides in Denmark? Herbicide use in conservation agriculture. Is it a discussion or?
In conservation agriculture.
The role of glyphosate.
In this group, there's very different opinions on the use of pesticides. Some are really working hard on reducing it and have the belief that if we make a really good crop rotation system, then we can really lower the use of pesticides. Others are not that concerned about the impact of the pesticides. They think all the regulation already take care of the really damaging pesticides, so we don't have to reduce the use.
And in particular about herbicides, the farmers in this group, they talk a lot about increasing biodiversity to get natural enemies, and that helps also to sometimes to use, or that's of course also insecticides, but also in some cases herbicides too. But there are big variations in this group on how much they are keen on trying to lower the input, or if it's okay the way it is.
Yeah. Some are not using insecticides anymore in this group, and they say it's because of the useful insects, but some are, so it's, yeah.
We have 3 very short, precise questions, and then we have to close. And then I think Ida and Nunu will be there for the coffee break also, but then they will leave because they have more important things to do than talking to us. So, Marcelina, Erik, and Helena.
Okay, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Nice to hear how it went in Denmark. What I would like to know is, how do these farmers learn about new measurements, new innovations that they can adopt? Do they talk to each other? They don't always trust the advisor, I learned. So how do they learn? How do they get new information and things?
It's a good question. They use this network group a lot. That is actually, for most of them, their main source of information. And a lot of them mention in the interviews that there is not yet a sufficient consultancy on conservation agriculture. So and they actually tell that, well, often I'm used as my crop consultant. He often uses me as a consultant.
Yes,
so yeah, and then they also are very good to use the internet, YouTube videos, and they also go on different study trips, for instance, different places in Europe to investigate how is conservation agriculture practiced in different places.
We can change.
Yeah.
I have a double short question. Do you think the farmers have the relevant information on the impact of climate change on Danish agriculture? And the question of society, do you think you have the relevant information on what will be the impact of climate change on the Danish agriculture, in order to have, I must say, relevant or efficient analysis of the situation? In other terms, do you have the sufficient knowledge in order to go further in the good direction on the adaptation measure?
So if we have this knowledge, both in society in general and if the farmers that we're working with have this. Yeah.
Well, the farmers have very different opinions on how they will be influenced by climate change. So I don't know who knows who are right and who are wrong.
Yeah.
But
my key problem is is nobody have a minimum of knowledge on what would be, according to the climatic scenario, the impact, how we can discuss about how to adapt their system to that climate change. In other terms, I saw that there was an hypothesis that conservation agriculture will reduce soil water evaporation. But if you are growing more and more cover crops in order to cover the soil during all the seasons, all the year, perhaps the water evaporation will be higher than before. Yeah. So what I mean is how to link this discussion with relevant agronomic knowledge in details to be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
You understand my question, or is it too difficult? So, has farmers information, and has you as master students sufficient information on that to discuss with farmers in detail on how to adapt their farm to climate change? That what?
Anyway,
What was your
some
opinion
of-
on that?
Some of the farmers doesn't have any knowledge about it, and they say we don't want, we don't know what to expect, so we don't really consider climate change as something
Okay.
we have to adjust to. So there's definitely a lack of knowledge, and some are very looking for different, following the research on also climate change subjects. So they probably know more, but it's very different from the farmers.
I think also one challenge is this about climate change is sometimes when we talk about it, it's like a constant thing going on, but it's not. It's very fluctuating. So one year you think, oh, you know, this is due to climate change. Another year, nothing is happening, and so on. So for some of the farmers, it's difficult to kind of specify this strategy will deal with all my problems because the main challenge is actually fluctuations. And I think one of the farmers, Niels, you'll meet him tonight. He's very good at thinking about this diversity. He believes that if he's increasing the diversity on his farm, then this diversity is able to adapt to the different to the fluctuations happening, comparing different years and so on.
Okay.
So that's his belief, I think. Final question.
Do the farmers follow the three principles, like no tillage and rotation and soil cover? Or they take maybe only one or two?
It's they follow it in various degrees, but and we've been we work with the principles in order to have a framework to discuss this practice from. But whether all the farmers in this group look at I work with these three principles are more unclear. I think a lot of them they have this in mind, but I think it's more like, well, this is what fits my system, my soil in the best. So I do what is case specific for me. It's there are variations. They are not strictly doing the same thing and strictly following all the principles.
And they also define the principles very different, the farmers, because they are not like a very clear. It's not a clear definition. How low can you tillage the soil? You don't find that definition anywhere. So the farmers have very they use it as it fits to their system sometimes.
But I think you could also highlight that they have a farmer association called Reduced Tillage in Denmark, and they are all supporting that association.
No, I'm saying because some of the effects that you are saying you get, like Eric said, with the infiltration or improving of the soil, carbon sequestration, might not be true if you don't have the whole system.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is also what we are putting together. How that's exactly why we are looking very detailed in what every of the farmers actually do, how they practice this system, and then we combine it with which different effects they experience on the different sustainability parameters, in order to look at if you practice it this way, then what do you experience, and are there differences? If it makes sense.
We can go on the whole day on this topic. We have to close it down. Thanks, Ida and Nynne, for showing up.